Bom dia a todos.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ricardo Moura, Director of Investor Relations and Proprietary M&A. Welcome to the results conference call of the first quarter of 2023 of Banco ABC Brasil. For those who are watching the broadcast via Zoom and wish to follow in English, please click on the translation right button below on your screen. Before we get started, I would like to share the following disclaimers. Any statements that may be made during this conference regarding the business prospects of Banco ABC Brasil, projections, operating and financial goals constitute the beliefs and assumptions of the company's management, as well as current available information to Banco ABC Brasil. Future considerations are not guarantee of performance and involve risks, uncertainties, and assumptions because they refer to future events and therefore they depend on circumstances that may or may not occur. Investors and analysts should understand that general conditions, industry conditions, and other operating factors may affect the future results of Banco ABC Brasil and may lead to results that materially differ from those expressed in future conditions. In compliance with the General Data Protection Law, we also inform that this presentation is being recorded and broadcasted on our social network, and that, in proceeding, you are aware that personal data such as voice and image may be shared without any harm or breach of law. All content, including the presentation, is available on our IR website. To follow the presentation better, I suggest you to download the content on the QR code that you have on your screen. And at the end, we are going to have a Q&A session. By my side, we have Sérgio Borejo, our CFO. Welcome, Borejo. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ricardo. Thank you for the opportunity. It's a great pleasure to be here with you. I would like to also invite directly from New York, our CEO, Sérgio Lulia. Good morning, everyone. I'm here following the presentation and I'm available for Q&A. So it's up to you, Ricardo. Thank you, Lulia. Now I invite our CFO to present the results of Banco ABC Brasil, bringing the main financial and operational highlights. Borejo, the floor is yours. Thank you. Well, let's start with the results. We will start with the highlights of the first quarter of 2023, in which the net profit reached 190 million Brazilian reais, a growth of 3.7% compared to the same period of 2022. That represents a reduction of 3.7% compared to the previous quarter, capturing the isolated impact of a company in the CIB segment, which was provisioned from 30 to 70%. The return on average equity was 14.4%, excluding isolated impacts on provision expenses. The return on annualized capital was 16.5%. In the same period, we had a growth in the margin with clients of 20% compared to the same period in the previous year and 3% compared to the fourth quarter of 2022. The portfolio quality remained resilient. Operations with delays over 90 days closing the quarter at 0.6%, below our historical average and in line with the previous quarter. Finally, the expanded credit portfolio operated practically in stability, had an expansion of 16% in the last 12 months, while the middle portfolio grew 38% in the same period, both within our growth guidance for the year 2023. And now, let's watch a video with our main highlights. Well,
Em relação à carteira de
about the expanded credit portfolio, in addition to the already mentioned growth of 16% in the year, it is important to notice the performance of the corporate segment, which presented an expansion of 22% in the last 12 months, representing almost 58% of the expanded credit portfolio. Analyzing by credit segment in the annual comparison, the decline in loans at the CIB was offset by the growth in corporate securities and guarantees issued, with expression of 31% and 5% respectively. In the quarterly variation, the first quarter traditionally presents a higher concentration of maturities. The middle segment, for example, presented a 4.7% reduction compared to December 2022. This behavior, well, it's in line with the portfolio's historical seasonality.
no próximo slide,
In the next slide, we can observe the expanded credit portfolio that continues with a high sector diversification, presenting a very scattered credit portfolio. Besides, it has its largest expansion in defensive sectors like agribusiness, energy, and infrastructure. This composition, together with the origination of quality operations, has contributed to the portfolio's resilient performance, maintaining low delay rates even at moments of economic cycles with higher interest rates. Now, we are going to emphasize the financial margin with clients, which had its 15th consecutive quarter of expansion, the result of gradual increase in products with higher added value in the revenue mix, including derivative products related to energy and the expansion of cash management services. Annualized spread with clients reached 4.4%, the 7th consecutive quarter above the 4% market. The spread with clients adjusted by provision closed the quarter at 3%, an increase of 23 base points in the quarter, reflecting lower provisions expenses in the quarterly comparison. In relation to the financial margin, the margin with clients was the main lining, closing the first quarter at 345 million and representing a growth of 20% compared to the same quarter of the previous year and 3% compared to the fourth quarter of 2022. The shareholders' equity to CDI was 141 million in the quarter, almost in line with the previous quarter. Margin with market had a total of 64 million Brazilian reais in the first quarter of 2023, a 23% decrease compared to the first quarter of 2023, which was one of the quarters with the highest historical performance in this line. As a result, the net interest margin reached 550 million in the first quarter, a growth of almost 23% on the year. Finally, the annualized rate of net interest margin closed the first quarter at 4.7%. And remember, the first quarter has fewer calendar days, and that makes the seasonality lower in relation to the margin. Starting the analysis of the credit portfolio, loan overdue more than 90 days, ended the quarter at 0.6% of the portfolio, a little bit below our historical average. The delays of the CIB and corporate segments were practically stable compared to the previous quarter, showing the resilience of the portfolio, even in a scenario of higher interest rates. It's important to notice that this delay level does not capture the impact of the isolated event in the CIB segment. In the middle segment, the delay reached 3%, a result of the slight reduction in the portfolio in that quarter, and delay increases concentrated in specific older crops, remembering that this number does not capture eventual reviews regarding the coverage of BNDES. Following our presentation, the expanded provision expenses closed the quarter at 99 million reais, equivalent to 0.9% of the expanded portfolio. And the main special effects of the quarter were a provision of a company in the CIB segment, increasing 30% to 70%, is increasing expense in the quarter, partially offset by the reduction of 2,682 credit portfolio, and the migration to names with better credit score. Also, in this specific quarter, we improved the methodology for classification of credit operations using a more granular scale, in line with the implementation process of the IFRS 9 rules, considering the parameters of Resolution 2682. And given the portfolio with good clients, we had shorter deadlines and good guarantees. Well, meanwhile, the loan loss reserve in relation to the portfolio ended the quarter at 3.2%, an increase of 50 basis points in the quarter. In the view of the segment, there was a reduction in the corporate and a slight increase in middle. In CIB, we increased the level of provisioning due to the current situation of a company in this segment, as we mentioned before. Finally, our coverage ratio covered 496% above the historical average. Moving to the service revenue, it reached 13.5% of the total revenue in this quarter. We continue to verify the growing contribution of the insurance tariffs and brokerage, which closed the quarter with a growth of 51% compared to the same period in 2022. Reflecting both the growing contribution of the insurance broker as well as the increase in our client bases. On the other hand, in relation to the investment banking, the historical seasonality of the first quarter that are less dynamic compared to other periods of the year, it was impacted by the low volume of fixed income issues in the market. And now, for the expenses, which in the first quarter of 2023 presented a 5% reduction compared to the previous quarter, in the annual comparison, they grew 20%, a rate substantially lower than the expansion of the previous year. With that, we keep as an expectation for the year a gradual improvement in the efficiency index, with continuous control of expenses together with the continuity in the expansion of revenues through the gain of scale, maturation of new initiatives, and the capture of operational leverage. On slide 12, we present the evolution of our funding. At the end of March, the funding balance totalized 44 billion reais, growth of 11% in 12 months. Management of assets and liabilities had accumulated class positions positive in all vertices. A liquidity position at the end of the quarter was approximately 8.5 billion reais, the equivalent of 1.6 times the value of the shareholders' equity. One of the Banco ABC Brasil success factor in access of competitive funding is both local and international currencies. This condition is supported by rating grades equivalent to the Brazilian rating by the main market risk agencies, or in the case of them, a grade above the sovereign. We believe that the quality of our funding is even more relevant in an environment of high basic interest rate, standing out more than ever as one of our main differentials. As we can see here, we ended the quarter with a reference equity of 6.5 billion reais and a shareholders' equities of 5.3 billion reais. The total BIS ratio reached 14.8%, while the level 1 capital closed the quarter at 12.8%. This variation resulted from the increase of the high-weighted assets, an effect partially offset by the appropriation of the first quarter of 2023 results and the issuance of equity instruments. We consider the current level of capitalization comfortable and enough for us to continue with our business plan. Now, on slide 14, we see the evolution of the annual result. The recurring net income from the first quarter of 2023 reached 190 million reais, a growth of 3.7% compared to the same period last year. This trend can be explained mainly by the increase in margin with clients and an increase with shareholders' equity, remunerated as CDI, being partially compensated by the increase in the provision expenses and the growth of expenses, which already has a slow trend. The average equity of the quarter was 14.4%, a reduction of 114 basis points compared to the same period in 2022. In relation to the recurring net income and the annualized return on shareholder equities, were affected by two main factors: additional provision of the isolated case in CIB segment and the lower income from investment banks. Excluding those individual impacts in the provision expenses, the annualized return on equity would be around 16.5% in the quarter, even considering investment bank income lower than our historical average. Well, those are the highlights we would like to present, and now we are available for questions from the participants in the video conference. Thank you. Thank you, Borejo, for bringing us the overview of the bank's results in this first quarter. I also thank everyone who's following the broadcasting. Now, I would like to invite our CEO, Sergio Lulia, to start the Q&A session.
Lulia, agora é com você.
Lulia, the floor is yours.
Oi, Ricardo. Tô aqui. Eu não escutei nenhuma pergunta.
Hi, Ricardo. I haven't heard any questions so far.
Ótimo. Vamos agora.
Great. Now we will start our Q&A session.
Todos que nos...
Well, to everyone who is following us, feel free to ask questions. To participate, just click on the icon on the bottom of your screen. We are available for questions. Our first question comes from Flávio Oshida from Bank of America. Flávio, thank you for your participation. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity of asking question. I have a question in relation to the middle portfolio. We saw that the overdue has increased a lot, and in this quarter, the growth reduced. At the same time, you have a guidance of growth for this portfolio for this year. I would like to understand, when we get all that together, if the guidance of these 35-45 portfolio continues, if you see any risk of not reaching the guidance, if you want to uptake a stronger growth for this portfolio throughout the next quarters. Thank you.
Quer que eu responda essa?
I can answer this one.
Você quer responder, Sérgio?
Yeah, go ahead.
Pode falar, Borejo, daí depois...
Go ahead, Borejo. I can add on afterwards. Good morning, Flávio. Thank you for your question. Well,
Essa queda de
this reduction, this increase on the overdue, in a way or another, was something expected. Our portfolio was a new portfolio. It grew throughout
dos anos, dos últimos
the last years. It got more and more mature.
com esse amadurecimento.
And with this maturation, we have this trend, and the overdue was natural to increase.
Atingimos, como você
And we reached, as you've mentioned, 3% in the first quarter
de 23,
of 2023.
houve
There was
uma queda na carteira
a reduction in the portfolio in the first quarter, as in the first quarter of last year.
começamos o ano
We started the year
com o primeiro trimestre
with the first quarter that was weaker.
middle caiu.
The middle portfolio had a reduction, and even last year, we grew more than 40%. Of course, that's not a guarantee for the growth this year, but we expected a first quarter that was somehow weaker, a weak production, mainly because the third and the fourth quarter of last year was a little bit stronger. In relation to this year's guidance, we are going to keep it. It's way too early. We are in April still. Well, in April last year, we had this similar situation, and the issue now is the volume. the volume and the demand for credit, if it's going to return or not. It was weaker in the first quarter. We believe it was potentialized, besides the seasonality, it was potentialized by the interest rate, but we are keeping the guidance and also our middle term and long term plans. And that's part of our strategy here. Perfect. Thank you. If I can ask another question in relation to the evolution of the NII and the NIM, because you've mentioned there was a migration for clients with a better ratings, and that explained the provision that wasn't that high, and in relation to the US provision, and we have a lower number for the middle. So when we get everything, the middle growth that was a little bit lower and the better rating clients, what should we expect for the growth of the net interest margin? Well, Flávio, this you were right in relation to the portfolio growth, but the engine for the margin growth here for us, and when we look 12 months to the past, it was 20%, is the mix of products. In our point of view, if we manage to continue with added value products, so energy, cash management, we also have other products, derivatives was pretty good. All that helps us in this net interest margin expansion. Our ambition, our objective is to continue with the diversification, adding added value to our portfolio. And in our point of view, we have room to continue with the gradual growth. It won't be a step in our margin expansion, but we believe there is room for growing the margin, not with the same size we had probably in 2022, but the trend is to escalate. Ricardo, if I can add a little bit about that, well, and take advantage of Flávio's question. Here's what I think. One thing is our strategic planning. I believe it's pretty clear, you know what is it, this diversification of customer segments with a stronger positioning in middle market. We have a larger management of products, and that brings a higher profitability, even for segments that we were present. And the third is a family of channels that is broader, including digital channels. Well, a factor that is essential for the success of this strategy, and we've seen that in the last 30 years, is to navigate the credit cycles. If you know how to go through that, it's to speed up when you have to speed up, break when you have to break, have some portfolio arrangements when we see those opportunities. When there is a proper economy, you make your adjustment, but that doesn't change the long-term planning. It makes it more feasible. And in this first quarter, for instance, due to the credit scenario that is a little bit more challenging, as well as the closure of the capital market and everything, it is the moment in which, as in 2022, 2020, during the pandemic, and 2014, 2015, during the Lava Jato case, and 2018-19, you have great companies with an excellent rating that access bilateral loans. In the past, they would go for the capital market, and then they come from the bank balance sheets, and they pay rates and fees that tariffs that they don't pay. We take advantage of these moments to use those assets concerning the risk we are taking as a bank. And you are a little bit more conservative in other sectors. There's no problem. And then when the credit cycle improves and we are at the end of the cycle, we have an interest rate that at this level for a while.
tem se desacelerado.
The economy is losing its speed. We have some political issues that have jeopardized some aspects, but it's a moment in which it's reasonable
É importante
and important to the bank to select the assets.
que nós temos.
And it's one of the advantages. And you have a portfolio with a short duration, a year something, and a bank that has flexibility due to the size it has with clients, so we can enter and exit according to the scenario. Once again, it's more an example of things that we've done in different crises, in different moments in which the credit was more complicated. We did once again, but looking ahead, our plan is intact and won't change. That's it.
Obrigado, Sérgio.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergio.
Flávio, também pela sua pergunta.
Thank you, Flavio, for your question.
Vamos para a próxima pergunta.
Now let's go to the next question. It comes from Yuri Fernandes from JP Morgan. Yuri, thank you. The floor is yours. Thank you, everyone. I would like to ask about the PDD outlook. It's difficult to have a visibility in corporate cases. They come and go, but the impression I have is that we had a reshuffle of the little letters in other portfolio, and we have a provision that is good so far. My question is, do you expect to continue with 100%, 70, and the PDD with the best options? Loan loss provision would go back to the level. It will be high for provisions. What should we expect in relation to LLP?
Posso responder?
Can I? Go ahead. Sure.
Tá bom.
Well,
Então, Yuri, obrigado.
Yuri, thank you. Thank you for your question.
Falando do caso
Talking about the specific case
do CIB,
of CID, we believe that 70% reflects close what the case shows. In light of what we see today, we don't expect more or less provisions. We believe it's pretty compliant with what we propose. Of course, if the plan doesn't close or with other bases, we are going to review. But considering the information we have, 70% is pretty adequate. In relation to the future outlook, this is one of the most difficult things for us to foresee in our balance. So we have one or two cases of provision. Those things change the short-term scenario. What we see from today, we don't have a specific case that calls our attention. Despite the high interest rates that's been around for a while, the maturity of corporate and CIB and the middle 0.6% above 90 days, that's a good number, below our historical average. And we expect a year so far, a year that will be normal without any specific case in our watch list. Of course, with all challenges of an environment with an interest rate around 14%. And the specific case, Barejo, and thanks for your answer, the treatment for those overdues for, how it's going to work in order to consider the coverage. It's well provisioned, but I would like to understand the ratios from now on. According to our policy, what we usually do, while the plan is not signed, we are going to count the overdue from that moment, and then when it's signed, it's a new operation. Probably due to the size of the case, we will release the overdue time with and without the specific case, so we have better transparency to the reader of the earnings. That's what we are thinking about doing. Thank you, Barejo. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, Yuri.
Thank you, Yuri. Now, next question
De Matheus
from Matheus Raffaelli
Itaú BBA.
from Itaú BBA. Matheus, thank you for your presence and your participation. The floor is yours. Good morning, Ricardo, Borejo, Lulia. Thank you. I would like to go back to the middle relating to profitability. Of course, this expansion was very good when we increased the spreads, scattered the provision, and then 2023 would be the year in which the middle is not what retains and contributes in that aspect to the bank. Is there any expectation for you this year, or the overdue periods seen in this segment and the credit scenario would postpone the middle to overcome the profitability, maybe due to a higher cost of credit, potentially lower volumes, considering a lower demand of customers, as Borejo mentioned previously? Thank you.
Quer responder essa, Sérgio?
Do you want to answer this one, Sergio? Well, sure. Mateus, thank you for your question. This year, for sure, well, not for sure, but considering everything we've seen, middle is a segment with a positive profitability. And even with the delays we have, that is around 3%, the provision is 4.6, 4.5. So we did that last year, and the provisioning, well, it supported overdue periods of this size. So I don't see these outstanding amounts that will affect us. So the challenge is, as Borejo mentioned, we had in the first quarter. Today we have a tighter credit ruler, and we have up to November the numbers. It's tighter and makes the origination of new operations more difficult, but we have well-established process and tested projects. So the decision to grow or not is a decision that is under our power. You open or close the tap. Today, we are a little bit tighter, but I believe that we are at the end of a tighter credit cycle. Maybe it will last up to 4 months, but we have conditions when we start the process of adjustment of the monetary policy. If we have good rules for approving the reforms in June and July, we are going to have a proper economic climate, allowing the bank to allow a little bit more of flexibility. Because clients are there, contacts are made, commercial teams are well informed, the process are arranged. So it's a matter of deciding when to speed up. So far, we are not doing that, but soon we are going to do that. Thank you, Mateus, for your question. Now we are going to our next question from Eric Quito from Bradesco. Eric, thank you for your participation. Good morning, Ricardo, Sergio. Thank you for the opportunity of asking a question. I have 2 of them. First, a follow-up in relation to the middle. I would like to understand what you are expecting of outstanding payments. We saw overdue, and you expected this deterioration in this months. I would like to understand what you are expecting for the year, for the quarter, and if, well, you have a provision of 4.5 of the portfolio, or if there could be a more conservative approach. My second question is in relation to PIS. So probably this year is going to be a little bit weaker. I would like to understand what you expect in relation to that for this year, and if we can compensate with operational leverage of all other revenue lines.
Quer responder essa, Sérgio?
Do you want to answer this one? Yeah, you can start, and I will add on that. Okay, thank you. Eric, thank you. Thank you for your participation and your question. In relation to the outstanding payments of middle, well, it's around that, a little bit more, a little bit less, but it can have a small a small growth, but nothing distant from what we are expecting. Around that, we cannot see anything that is different from that throughout the year. Well, in relation to 4.5%, what was the idea? We had a provisioning that was low in the specific, so we had 4.5%, saying that this will not be supported. And this delay for the portfolio is not sustainable. The same thing should happen. So 4.5 seemed to be a level that is quite reasonable for that moment. So this is an anti-cyclic. And if we have this be above 4.5%, we don't need a buffer for that. 4.5 was way more for adjusting our portfolio for a benign cycle that didn't seem to be sustainable throughout time. In relation to the fees, as Sergio mentioned in the previous question, we are in a moment in which portfolios, corporate portfolios from banks, well, they are not growing. They have a low growth, and with an activity for the market, the capital market of fixed income, well, it's also low. So it's a matter of time. If the capital market doesn't come back, well, you will have an increase on the corporate portfolio with higher prices, adequate prices related to the risk of that moment, as Sergio mentioned in the previous question. So we are ready for both scenarios. And we don't know which one we should turn first, but we need to be ready for both. If the capital market, and we expect that to come back, we are ready. We are an investment bank, and we are ready full throttle. And if it doesn't come back, and we have good opportunities, probably they are going to happen in relation to incrementing our corporate balance sheets. Well, we are ready for that too.
Borejo, se eu puder complementar.
Borejo, if I could add on Eric's question. Eric, with everything that Borejo mentioned, here's another point. If we get this quarter, a weak quarter for investment banking, a quarter with middle that had a delay, and in CIB also, we had 14.4, just removing the provision, only considering the level of provisioning to be the historical average, and not considering any fee activity investments. I believe that we are building a bank that has the diversification of sources in different segments and different products. Those that generate fees or not, well, they have a capital allocation, just like the derivatives. Well, they bring a better resilience. So, for instance, we are unhappy with 14.4. It happened, we didn't enjoy, but it's part of the game. In a quarter that we considered that we were affected by something that it was larger than we expected, and the investment banking, due to the market condition, didn't perform, it was a YR that is way more sustainable due to the leverage of the operational leverage, due to product management, and due to the use of digital channels. Thank you, Eric. Now we are going to move to the next question. Carlos Gomes, last HSBC. The floor is yours. Thank you. Two questions. First, I was expecting an increase in margin because they say that the spreads have increased after the crisis in January, but we saw two in the results. Are we going to have a difference in the next quarter, or the effect of the mix is higher? And the second question is in relation to capital. There was a reduction of 2.1 to 11.6. And once again, we are at the end of the cycle. Shouldn't we have a little bit more of capital at this moment? Thank you. Can I answer? Please, please. The increase in margin, Carlos, first of all, good morning. Thank you for your question. Well, you guided the answer. There is an increase in margin if you keep exactly the same portfolio composition. However, as I previously mentioned, this is a moment we take advantage of, and we believe we should do that. We migrate to better quality options. Name by name, the spreads increased, but in total, when you have a shift for customers, for clients of better quality, it doesn't mean that the entire result is higher. So we can keep instead, but we are working with better quality clients. When the economy is performing better and the perspectives are better, it's the other way around. So the clients with a better rate for CIB, they access the capital markets, the spreads are lower, and we no longer have loans, and we are more aggressive in the middle market or in the corporate where the spreads are higher. In relation to the capital, well, we have a capital level that is pretty comfortable. We, historically speaking, at certain moments in which we are able to use a higher capital, we recapitalize the dividends. It's a possibility this year if we consider we can use this capital. We are going to continue with that mechanisms where you pay dividends and offer to investors the possibility to reinvest. And with that, we believe we have a robust capital that can support the business plan of the bank for a longer period, a long period. We have a planning of 3-5 years. We never see the need of growing less or accessing other sources of capital because we can generate enough capital here to support our own growth. Well, but at this moment, you haven't decided the reinvestment of dividends, right? Yes, that's a discussion, that's a decision from the board.
No momento oportuno, levará essa discussão ao conselho.
And when the right moment comes, we are going to take that to the board, they decide, and we release to the market. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Carlos. Now I'm just waiting for our next question. Our next question is from Lucas Martins from Prada Assessoria. Thank you. The floor is yours. Good morning, Lulia. Hello, everyone. I would like to understand, besides the partner programs you took part, you had the IB change. Could you shed a light on your plans? What is the governance? And a second question about this initiative of credit. Do you have any perspective of the size that you want to have inside the bank? Or are you going to buy only corporate credit or in the market as a whole, or only the credit from the bank? Hi, Lucas. Thank you for your questions. Here it is. We have a model here at the bank for partnership, and you know this, and it is here since 1997, 25 years, in fact. And we believe this is a quite successful model. because in fact, it brings to shareholders, the minority shareholders, this sense of ownership. So they have the appetite for the proper risk, a long-term consideration, and increased costs and everything, and you are investing your own capital at risk. So we also thought that this is a factor that was paramount for the history of Banco ABC Brasil until today. And we thought, well, if it is like that, why not implement the same model in other initiatives? We started. The first experiment is the broker, the insurance broker, in which the CEO has a participation in the shares, and it grants him somehow that responsibility, that liability for the expansion project. Well, there's no risk there as it is a broker, but it brings that long-term thought that we really enjoy, and also the upside of the business. The second activity we did like that, not in relation to the partnership, but there is a direct participation in results. It's the energy company, and it's performing pretty well. And now we have two other initiatives. The investment banking, there was an approval for the central bank, and the idea here is it's an activity we have been performing pretty well. In relation to the domestic debt, we have a well-consolidated activity, but with a potential to grow. In relation to M&A also, and then the potential of growth is even better. We have a market share that is smaller, so we can grow a lot. And there is project finance, other products that are yet to develop. But in order to have a quality team and to attract good talents, a partnership program is pretty good. So people come with the assurance that the entire upside they bring to the business, they will be part of that. So we are doing this new company. We are preparing this new company. The executives that are leaders of the business, Cesar Bilong and Ricardo Rocha, they will be the executives that will continue with this subsidiary. They have their own participation, and a team, the second level, the N2 of the investment banking, all of them with participation. And that will allow us to strengthen the team, mainly in a moment like that, in which the investment banking market is a little bit stagnated. It's a good moment to strengthen the team. We have banks reducing their teams, and we have room enough for operations with corporate and middle clients. And the credit recovery company, it totally relates to our activity. So we have this credit recovery company with the same model. The partners have this participation, the executives have participation, the bank is the main shareholder. And then the idea here is to start experimenting the market, a higher focus with the corporate, because the retail customers is a little bit more competitive, but doesn't mean that we cannot buy retail portfolio. But we are going to acquire portfolios from the corporate market and in assisting our clients in buying their own portfolio, as well as in the servicing. I help to charge your receivables, and we can share the results in relation to what was achieved. And I believe it will help us in relation to the time to price the credit in another angle. We always mention that we priced the risk, but always in the desert. And now we have a team that has a long experience of pricing risk in cases that performed badly. And how do you deal with that? So we have a good synergy with our activity. And this is an activity that we are pretty optimistic. But we start low, just like everything. There's no purpose to start big. You need to have a learning curve. You need to test the systems. You need to test the collection capacity. And we grow. It's an activity that in 2-3 years, we are going to have a more relevant contribution to our results. Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you, Sergio. Let's see if we have any further questions. Oh, we have a question from Jorge Passo. Jorge, thank you for your participation. Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Sim. We can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. My question is for
Só se ele responder.
my question is regarding cost of risk, regarding the NPL. How do you see these metrics moving forward with the current information that we have as of today? Do you think them continuing going up? Do you think they have peaked? What's your best guidance for the end of the year? Thank you.
Jorge, I'm going to answer in Portuguese, and you can follow in the translation in English at the same time.
Okay.
Por favor.
Eu vou responder em
I'm
português.
going to answer in Portuguese. Our point of view in relation to credit cost and risk, we can divide in two blocks. The first one is about CIB and corporate. They are in low levels in a portfolio that is quite scattered and diversified. And it's pretty light still. A portfolio that, despite seeing the market with an increase of cases of single names, our portfolio is pretty light in CIB and corporate. And you can see that with the overdue time. In the middle, as Borejo mentioned during our call, we have 3% of overdue. And the vision is to go around that number. So today we have an approach that is a little bit more restrictive. It starts in November, December last year, and we are monitoring that closely. But it's a smaller piece of our portfolio, around 9% of our expanded portfolio. And it's a portfolio that has some additional protection in a higher provision level or more guarantees, and even additional guarantees coming from FGI programs. We don't see any trend to increase NPLs or delays in the portfolio with all the conditions we saw in the market, but it's something that we are monitoring closely. I don't know if I've answered
your question, Jorge.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your participation. Obrigado pela participação.
Thank you for your participation. Next question from Abud from Tese Investimentos. Thank you. The floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. Congratulations for the results. My question is in relation to PDD from LLP and the changes you had in classification, the ratings and everything. We saw a change that was quite meaningful, especially with credit going to AA. I would like to understand how was this process, and because in the past you had another methodology, and do you believe you are going to be more compliant with the level of positioning you are going to have in the following years? Well, Leo, thank you for your question. In fact, this is a methodology that we have been practicing for a while. In this quarter, it was a little bit larger, and it's related to the correct pricing when we, grant credit. Just talking a little bit about the technical aspects, but if you get the vertexes of provisioning of it is 0, 0.5, 1, 3. So you have some leaps. They work pretty well, but it goes up to half, 0.5 up to 1, from 1 to 3, and you need to respect the letters AA, AB, and so on. So what have we been doing? We are establishing a better granularity. Imagine you have a customer, a client that is provisioned at 0.5, and you say, well, the correct level is 0.4, 0.3. You change the LLP of this customer, but you can only provision the customer according to Resolution 2682 if you get this certain operation and classify as AA. So you have this entire movement. And how do we do to determine if it is 0.4, 0.3, and not 0.5? Well, you do that based on other factors, just like the level of guarantees, the term of the operation, the type of loan or operation you are doing. So this is also taken into account. And what happens is you have a movement among the letters, mainly in the balances, but you don't have a reflex in relation to the result for the provision. You don't have a reversion that is quite meaningful. And that was the rationale we used. We had done that for a certain group of clients in the past, and now we did for another segment. And that, well, respecting all parameters of Resolution 2682, it will be more compliant, more adherent. You migrate the criteria to something closer to IFRS 9 that is going to be implemented in 2025 here in Brazil, and you make pricing of the assets in a more dynamic way. Okay, thank you. Well, we finished our Q&A session. Thank you all for the participation. Well, we are reaching the end of our broadcast of the conference for results of the first quarter of 2023. Now I grant the floor to Borejo and Lulia so they can make their final considerations. I would like to thank once again for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to be here, with you all, and I hope to see you in the next teleconference for the next quarter. On my side, I would like to thank everyone for the presence, and I hope we were able to clarify any questions and show the trust we have in our project. And our project and our trust is still intact. So thank of you. We are going to see each other at the Itaú conference. Others, see you soon. Thank you so much, Lulia and Borejo. I also thank everyone for the participation. The presentation is available on our IR website. Also, the broadcasting video will be on our YouTube channel. And if you want to hear the broadcast in audio format, it will be available on the Spotify profile at our Banco ABC Brazil channel. So thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you.